Chapter 11. The following morning, Sir Happy seemed more like his old self, having benefited, in my humble opinion, from my sage advice the previous evening. After a hearty breakfast shared with Charles and Amelia, Sir Happy and I made plans for furthering our investigation. We still are without a connection between Jessup McGibbon's murder and the others, began Sir Happy. My gut tells me we are missing something extremely important, Marmee. I know we are. There is something else. The gentleman I detected at the crime scene, the one seen arguing with McGibbons the day of his murder, is directly involved in all of this. As to who he is and where we might find him, I do not know. We need more information, Marmee. I propose we go back to Lexington Court and see if we cannot locate someone who might know who this gentleman is. I groaned loudly at the thought of aimlessly interviewing person after person, trying to find the needle in the haystack individual who might know the identity or whereabouts of our mystery man. Sir Happy snorted at me and exclaimed, "Look here, old man, you were the one spouting off last night about how I needed to focus on the case and keep my mind off the fact my dear Stephen is not here. The least you could do was show a little support for my activity in that regard, considering it was your idea to plunge full force back into the investigation. I will go mad just sitting around this house waiting for news, so stop complaining and be glad I have the wherewithal to pursue this issue in my Stephen's absence. Besides, you need the exercise. You are getting a little soft around the middle with all those kipper snacks of yours." He poked me in the side and then trotted off, leaving me to stew over his parting blow. I might have protested loudly were he not partly, and I must emphasize, only partly correct. We set out from Hanover Place at mid-morning, fully dedicated, at least on the part of Sir Happy, to find some new lead in regards to the mysterious gentleman. "Surely someone has seen him before," Sir Happy said when we were once again trotting along on our way to Lexington Court. "Many of these Coster families travel all over London to sell their wares, so there's a chance at least one of them has seen this gentleman somewhere else before. It is worth our efforts to track the man down." When I said nothing in reply, Sir Happy asked, "Are you listening, Marmee?" "Certainly I am listening," I replied. "The gentleman is worth tracking down," I parroted. "Exactly," Sir Happy said. But as Sir Happy continued in his speech, I found myself distracted by the presence of a pigeon. Ordinarily, it would not have been a significant event to see a pigeon on the streets of London, especially considering the fact the city was virtually overrun with them. What made this pigeon decidedly different, and what initially caught my eye, was the distinct feeling the bird was following us and listening to every word we said. It seemed with every twist and turn of our journey, there he was, watching us. On Handsome Street, he was sitting on the lamp post, watching us cross in front of Folsom's tobacco shop. On Nelson Street, he was hiding in the portico of Madame Labeau's wig shop. And when we neared the old tannery on the corner of Cobbler and Row, he peered from the relic of what had once been the business's grand sign. Everywhere we went, the pigeon was there. Of course, this begs the question, how in the world could I tell one pigeon from another, considering so many of them look exactly alike? This reality would have made my observation questionable, were it not for the fact this particular bird was more than a little wall-eyed. I became so distracted by the presence of our feathered follower that Sir Happy finally stopped me in the middle of a busy thoroughfare to confront me on the issue. "Am I boring you, Marmee?" Sir Happy asked. "I would hate to think I was interrupting some deep contemplation of yours by discussing anything so mundane as the reason for our travels today." Perhaps we can postpone the rest of our journey, or perhaps the whole rest of the investigation, so you can find more stimulating activities to occupy your time. The sarcasm was so great in Sir Happy's voice, I knew he was very close to being offended, if he had not plummeted beyond that point already. "Forgive me, Sir Happy," I said in a hushed conspiratorial tone. I ushered Sir Happy to the side of the road and drew as near to my friend as I could, while attempting not to draw any undue attention from our feathered follower. Continuing in an even lower voice, I said, "Try not to panic, but I believe we are being trailed by someone. He has been shadowing us for quite some time. I did not want our stalker to know he was found out. I fully expected my companion to at least praise me for my powers of observation, but what I got was a kind of acknowledgement one gives when the obvious has been stated. "Yes, I noticed him when we first left the house," Sir Happy said. I should not have been surprised. Sir Happy had observed the presence of this pigeon. He was, after all, a master detective. I just had hoped at some point in our relationship I might have a momentary advantage over Sir Happy, perhaps finding a clue or some detail which had been missed by my ever-watchful friend. I have since learned very little got by him. Sir Happy must have detected my disappointment, because he very quickly added, "I had not noticed him before. Your intent focus on the bird's activities would have gained my attention, making the discovery of our stalker inevitable. I applaud you, Marmee, for your attentiveness to our surroundings. Now the real question is, what shall we do about him?" It was a good question indeed, one which I had not considered before. I shrugged my shoulders at Sir Happy, unable to offer any suggestions of my own. "As I see it," Sir Happy said, "we have two choices in the matter. We can ignore him and hope he gains the courage to approach us on his own, or we can confront him and try to force whatever communication he currently is debating. Since I am in no mood to be stalked by a bird, I say we go with the later approach and confront the fellow before we take another step." Since I had no alternative plan, I agreed. Sir Happy initiated the contact by yelling up to our avian shadow. "Excuse me, sir," Sir Happy yelled. The bird froze where he stood. "Yes, you up there on the ledge. Is there some reason why you are following us?" Apparently, the direct address from Sir Happy was more than the poor pigeon had anticipated, because he very quickly took flight, disappearing over the top of the buildings. "Well, I guess you took care of him," I said. Sir Happy shook his head. "I do not think we have seen the last of our feathered friend. Give him enough time to gather his nerve again, and he will be back." Sir Happy and I finally reached the Lexington Court Market, where we spent the better part of the day asking around about the mysterious gentleman. We received very few credible accounts, considering the fact we had little information to offer potential witnesses about his appearance or physical features. The most we had to go on was the fact he was a gentleman and had previously gotten into an argument with McGibbons shortly before his death. One scruffy little dog recalled seeing a gentleman the day before McGibbons' murder, but could not swear it was the same man who had confronted Gibbons in the market the following day. "I wasn't close enough to see much of the man's features, but they was both wearing top hats." It was becoming more and more apparent to us we would have little success in tracking down this man's whereabouts without obtaining more specific details about his person. Luckily for us, we ran into our old friend, Mr. Snuffles, who seemed genuinely glad to see us. "Wasn't expecting to see you gents today," was his happy greeting. "Did you talk to Jasmine yet?" Sir Happy indicated we had indeed. "Something, ain't she?"
Still remember the first time I met her. Scared me out of my skin, she did. But she grows on ya."
He smiled broadly at us both.
"So, what brings you gents back to the market so soon? Need some more kipper?"
I laughed, remembering the first time we were introduced. "No, dear friend," I began. "We are in search of more information regarding our canine assailant. It appears as though we have hit a dead end, being unable to track him beyond his presence the day of the murder. We were hoping to find someone who had seen him elsewhere in town, perhaps nearer to his residence, but so far we've had no luck in the matter." Sir Happy interjected. "I don't suppose you could give us a bit more detail regarding the man, like height, age, or hair color? Anything which would help us distinguish him from the other top hat-wearing gentlemen." Our friend looked thoughtful for a moment.
"He was tallish, about 2 meters high, looked about mid-40, dark hair, almost black, except for a bit of salt creeping in at the temples. He had real dark eyes."
"I thought you said you were not very close to him," Sir Happy said.
"I wasn't," Mr. Snuffles replied. "But when he was walking up to McGibbon's, the gent stopped and looked over at my Pearl. I got a real good look at his eyes. Come to think of it, he miffed me pretty bad, 'cause I figured he was gawking at her on account of her injuries. Then he moved on and started arguing with McGibbons."
Sir Happy thought for a moment. "And you are certain you had never seen this man before?"
"Never,"
Mr. Snuffles replied with great certainty.
"Although I thought I saw him later, after the murder. But the bloke was too young."
Sir Happy thanked our friend for his help, and we began to wend our way home. "Very interesting, Mommy, don't you think?" "What is that?" I asked. "The look from the gentleman to Miss Pearl," Sir Happy said. "I would hardly consider a man's rudeness, regardless of his status in life, anything to be interested in," I said. "It is an unfortunate reality that people are voyeuristic when it comes to pain and suffering. Why didn't he stop and offer his help? It was obvious Miss Pearl was hurt. He might have offered money or something, but no. What did he do? He stared at her like he would a carnival sideshow, as though he had no manners at all. I personally find his actions appalling." Sir Happy replied in a very matter-of-fact tone. "Mommy, let us not forget we are investigating a murder here, and this man is more than likely linked in some way. I doubt seriously there's much compassion in him. I suspect there was more to his perusal of Miss Pearl than mere curiosity. Consider the fact she was most likely attacked by the same beast we are hunting, and if that gentleman is involved somehow, he may even have been admiring his handiwork." The notion sickened me. To think, in a single act of brutality, someone could be responsible for the complete emotional and physical destruction of another human being, and then later go back to admire their handiwork. It positively made my stomach roil. I was about to say something else in regards to the mysterious gentleman when I was interrupted by a loud pfft. I looked around to find the source of the sound, but could find no obvious culprit. Pfft. I looked to Sir Happy, but he too seemed at a loss. "What the?" Sir Happy said. Pfft. There it was again. But this time, Sir Happy's keen sense of hearing detected the direction from which the noise was issuing, and he immediately pounced around the corner in the direction of the sound. There was a surprised wail, and then a massive fluttering of wings. I was fast on Sir Happy's tail, so much so, in fact, I nearly tumbled into him and the wall-eyed stalker from earlier in the day.
"Good heavens!" the bird exclaimed, obviously startled by our sudden appearance. "Might you have given me some warning before scaring the life out of me?"
Sir Happy seemed more pleased with our sudden arrival than he was repentant of our startling this odd stranger. "Well, Sir Happy said with great satisfaction, "you seemed very eager to attract our attention, so I thought it best not to keep you waiting. Who are you? Why have you been following us? And what on earth do you want?" The pigeon seemed taken aback by such a direct address.
"Well, I never."
He stammered and stuttered a bit, trying to regain his composure. I rather hoped he would fly off again, allowing us to continue on our way home, but he seemed more resolute this time to stand his ground.
"First of all,"
the pigeon said in a very indignant voice,
"I do not know either of you, so I hardly think it appropriate for me to give you my real name."
"Certainly you're joking," I said. The pigeon ruffled his feathers at me and said,
"I make it a habit never to joke about matters such as this, but since you seem insistent on calling me something, the only name I can give you is—"
It was obvious the pigeon was searching for just the right pseudonym to give us. As he thought through the list of possible aliases he might offer, the pigeon bobbed his head back and forth in persistent agitation, an obvious nervous habit brought about by fear and uncertainty. Without warning, the bird exclaimed aloud,
"Aha!"
and said,
"Call me Horace."
"All right, then, Horace, why have you been following us?" Sir Happy asked.
"I have something important to tell you, but I have to know if I can trust you first."
Horace replied.
"How do I know you won't betray me once I tell you everything? I have no desire to end up like the dead man."
Horace suddenly began pecking the ground as if he were searching for some stray crumb of food or perhaps an unexpected bit of seed. I was uncertain if this momentary fit of industry was for our benefit, to help throw off the suspicions of an unseen spy, or merely out of some unconscious compulsion ingrained in his character. Whatever the case, I could feel the annoyance level begin to build in my companion. Normally, Sir Happy was the epitome of patience. It was nothing for him to spend hours with an individual, making him or her feel at ease and comfortable, just so he could, in turn, receive a few minutes' worth of information. I suppose with all good people there comes a moment where patience wears thin, and Sir Happy had reached his moment with Horace. Sir Happy cleared his throat and addressed our feathered friend. "Excuse me, Horace," Sir Happy interjected. "Is the ground pecking helping your memory, or is it calming your nerves? Whichever the case may be, would you please get on with it?" "I fear we will be here until nightfall if you don't, not meaning to be rude, but we have already had a very long day and would like to get home within the next few hours." It took all of my faculties to withhold the bubble of laughter which struggled for freedom. Ironically, Horace just looked at us with blank yellow eyes, as though he had not followed a word of what Sir Happy had said. This dazed response, or rather lack of response, made it even more challenging for me to maintain my composure. Sir Happy tried a different method to progress things along. "Look here, Horace. You seem reluctant to share whatever precious information you think you have, because you are afraid we will betray you to some mysterious person or group. Since we are strangers to each other, and since you approached us to begin with, let us assume there's no way we would even know to whom to betray you. Now, you can feel confident telling us what you know." Again, the blank stare. I decided it was time for me to step in and do what I could to help inspire a more cooperative tongue from our reluctant pursuer. I stretched very dramatically, making sure to extend my claws in the direction of our friend. I followed the stretch with an exaggerated yawn. As I loudly smacked my lips together, I nonchalantly turned to Sir Happy and announced, "I am getting so hungry. I could eat just about anything." I very innocently smiled at our new friend, making sure he could see every tooth in my mouth. It was as though a magic wand of clarity had been waved over this odd bird, because in an instant the pecking and bobbing stopped completely, and the vacant look which had taken up residency on Horace's face retreated. "Begging your pardon," Horace said, nervously clearing his throat. "I would hate to keep you from any pressing engagements." As he spoke, his previously puffed up feathers began to deflate, as though he were endeavoring to make himself seem much smaller in the eyes of a hungry cat. I must admit, a part of me felt guilty for having made the bird feel so uncomfortable. I'm not normally so mischievous at the expense of another, but Horace had given us little choice. As if reading my thoughts, Sir Happy piped up with, "Fear not, friend Horace. Mr. Marmee dislikes the taste of fowl, preferring instead the rich flavor of his precious smoked kipper snacks." I nodded my head in full agreement, hoping to lessen the blow which my previous dramatic pronouncement had produced. Unfortunately, our assertions did little to quiet our friend's fears, and during the rest of our conversation, Horace insisted on eyeing me suspiciously. I will say Horace's apprehension, where I was concerned, granted him a tremendous amount of focus, enabling him to finally come around to the reason for his introduction. "I suppose at this point I have nothing to lose by confiding in the two of you," Horace said. "I know you've been asking questions about the man who was murdered in the market area of Lexington Court. I've come to tell you, I believe I know why the man was killed, and I expect to be the next murder victim." Of all the information I anticipated we might receive from this odd bird, I never could have imagined he could offer anything more valuable than what he claimed to know. I was suspicious of such an assertion, if for no other reason than the fact I doubted this pigeon had enough focusing capacity to collect any sort of corroborating evidence to support his claim. As a matter of fact, I seriously doubted his ability to navigate his way back home after following us halfway across town. In my mind, Horace was the epitome of a bird brain, so I took his claim with a grain of salt. Sir Happy crinkled his brow ever so slightly as he asked, "What reason do you have to think you will be murdered?" Horace very proudly said, "Because I know the secret." Sir Happy and I stood there, waiting stupidly for an explanation to the somewhat climactic statement, but none was produced. Sir Happy very patiently urged, "Please do tell us what secret you are referring to." Again, the vacant stare. "Why, the secret that got the man killed in the first place." Sir Happy groaned and complained, "Oh, this is going to take forever." I was very much afraid Horace would once again return to peeking at the ground. It was indeed painful to watch this circular conversation fail to unfold. My heart went out to my dear friend Sir Happy, because I knew he was anxious to learn what mystery this bird shared with the late Jessup McGibbons. In another attempt to gather the information from Horace, Sir Happy tried rephrasing the question in such a way as to facilitate a more expansive and hopefully more helpful response. "Exactly what is the secret you have which also got McGibbons killed?" "I don't know the dead man's name, but I did witness the attack
on the wealthy little girl,
Horace said. Sir Happy made no reply. It was apparent by the look on his face Horace was expecting a more exuberant response from us in regards to his statement.
"Did you hear what I said?"
Horace said. I saw a look of wearied disappointment go across Sir Happy's face. I would hardly be concerned for my safety by having witnessed the attack. There were several others who witnessed it as well, and none of them have come to harm. I interjected. Do you mean to tell me McGibbons also witnessed the attack on the little girl? Horace replied emphatically,
"Yes!"
It seemed significant to me to discover Jessup McGibbons had been present and had witnessed the attack on little Penny, but I could not see how the mere witnessing of so public an occurrence would warrant McGibbons being singled out as a future victim. A look of distress went across Horace's face.
"You don't understand,"
he said, obviously frustrated by our inability to comprehend the magnitude of what he was trying to tell us.
"I didn't see just the dog attack the girl. I saw the dog return to the gentleman when he was done."
Sir Happy instantly perked up. He became so animated, in fact, he scared poor Horace nearly to death. My God, man, what did you say? Suddenly, Horace seemed quite pleased with the whole situation, especially after receiving the kind of response he was expecting.
"I said I saw the dog return to his master once the attack on the girl was done."
Sir Happy became extremely agitated and began pacing back and forth in front of me. Tell me everything, he barked, from the moment the attack began.
"Well," said Horace, "I was perched on a ledge above the head of the man you call McGibbons. I heard the sound of a carriage on the street, but did not pay much attention to it, or anything else for that matter, until I heard the screams of the little girl, and the man with her."
I interrupted him to interject the identity of the man as being Penny's father.
"Right,"
Horace said.
"the girl's father. At any rate, I see the dog and the girl and the father, and then I noticed this man listening to the whole commotion. He was standing right behind the corner of one of the other buildings, which he kept peering around to get a good look at things."
Would it have been possible for any of the others to see him based on his location relative to their own? Sir Happy asked. Horace thought for a moment.
"I would say not. This gentleman was standing in a position which made it easy for him to see and hear everything going on, but where the others could not easily see him."
Sir Happy paused in his pacing. Very interesting. Where was McGibbons during all of this?
"He was crouched behind his cart, trying not to be seen," replied the bird.
Go on, Sir Happy said with an edge to his voice.
"Right at that moment, when the dog turned towards the girl's father, the gentleman lifted something to his lips and blew real hard like—"
You mean like he was blowing a whistle? I asked.
"Yeah, except no sound came out," replied Horace.
By Jove, that's it! Exclaimed Sir Happy. That is why Percy's ears hurt. The man was using a dog whistle to call the dog off. Sir Happy looked at me, overflowing with excitement. Turning back to Horace, he asked, what happened next, after the man blew his silent whistle?
"The dog broke from the attack," continued Horace, "like you said, and ran around the corner to his master. I thought the man was going to beat the dog because he raised his cane to him like he was going to strike him on the head. The thing is, he stopped when he heard the sound of police whistles. He looked around him, and that is when he saw McGibbons and his cart. The gentleman looked like he was going to do something because he started to cross over in the direction of the cart, but changed his mind as the whistles got louder. He and the dog ran off around the corner and into an alleyway. I don't know where they went from there." Sir Happy looked intently at Horace and asked,
"What did this gentleman look like?"
I knew where he was going with the question, hoping to tie this man with the market attack.